Let's do this together. My name is Joshua Balata, and I'm an Indian expat living in France. Now's when you say, and I've learned the French language to fluency. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about how I did that without studying it at all. Let's get straight to it. This video I'm breaking down to 3 parts. The first part is where I talk about the background, what my level of French was when I started working really hard on it, and then the pros and cons of my method and the method itself. This is like a challenge. Let's see how long she can stay. When it comes to the background, I wish I had footage about what I sounded like when I began. So I began a long time ago, like in 2009. 11 straight years, right? I'm learning Dutch right now and I don't record myself that much. I mean, I'm doing it because I regretted not recording French, but it's not really there, So I'm sorry, I don't have any reference for you guys. And the reason I picked up French as a second language in pre-university college, because we have that when we're like 17 or something. I can't play with you right now. I know, but I got to record the video. I mean, I've been wasting. Let me give you a little treat, and then I come back to the video. So I picked French as a second language back in 2009 when I was in pre-university school. And in India, we have those things where you prepare for university for 2 straight years. Intensive on science for me, but I had a choice between French, Kannada and Hindi as my second language. And among the 3, I picked French. And the reason really was not because I had this dream of learning French, but because I did not want to deal with Hale Kannada, which is ancient Kannada. This is a language that I already spoke at that point, and I did not want to learn etymology. And with Hindi as well, it was prose Hindi, and it was not something that I already spoke this language too. I did not want to learn prose Hindi. And I was like, let's just go with French and see what happens if I picked French. It also helped that a lot of my friends picked French. So that's what I picked, and that's what I sticked with for 2 straight years. The reason I don't like to talk about the fact that I picked French such a long time ago is because people automatically think that you need 15 years to learn the language. I agree that it takes time, but it doesn't take 15 years. And the first 2 years that I had picked French, it just happened. I'm going to spend the time anyway, right? And I thought I'd just pick French, and honestly, I didn't get anywhere with it. My teacher kind of pushed me, like, Josh, just learn this, and that's all that you need for the exam. There's a syllabus. Pay attention to the syllabus and you'll pass, because it doesn't seem like you will otherwise. So I just focused on that. I got it over with. And then I got into engineering school, and there was no French focus in engineering school at all. That's just something that I did in my pastime, because I don't know why. I really don't know. I can't put my finger on why I picked to learn French. My level back then, after the first 2 years, was non-existent. And then I put 4 more years. So now after 6 years, it is still kind of just there. I don't know so much about it. Like, I do not know why there's an apostrophe here, why there is a silent part over here. I just memorized it like that, and I could just repeat what I memorized. There was absolutely no flow. I couldn't talk about topics that I wanted to talk about, but only the topics that I was taught to talk about, talking about my holidays and stuff. So it was really limited, my level of French back then. This brings me to the next part, which is the method. And this is where I'll spend the most amount of time, because this is something that is very intangible in my mind for me. So my intuition on learning French was something that I built along the way. It evolved with what worked and what didn't. So I want to share with you guys what worked for me and what didn't. When it comes to languages like English and French, there's a lot of content that you'll find online. There's an arsenal of stuff that you can download, and I did that. I downloaded everything that I could find. Turned out that most of it I didn't understand. I did not consume even a small, tiny 0.01% of all the stuff that I downloaded. There's just too much stuff, and it's too frustrating to look at the Russian language. Now when I look at French, it's quite familiar, but it's just like Russian language or a brand new language which you don't speak about at all. I had this problem with TMI, and then I started just deleting stuff because it was consuming so much data, and only focusing on stuff that drove value to me, stuff that I really did use. And this happened when my hard disk drive crashed. I lent it to a friend, my beautiful Baxter hard disk drive that my dad got me. Lent it to a friend. She asked for it. This friend from church, I will never forgive her. She asked for it, and I gave it to her in her hand. She doesn't collect it properly. It falls down and it breaks, and she's like, oops. Well, looks like I don't need your hard disk drive after all. And she walks away. And all my pictures, all my photos, my family photos, my friend stuff is gone. The hard disk doesn't work. It's corrupted. I threw it. Heartbreak warfare. I ended up getting a new hard disk drive and only getting the content that I will watch. I did not have access to internet, so I asked a friend of mine to download Petit Ours Brun. That's why this TV show is so close to my heart. It's 1 hour video that he downloaded in a flash drive and he gave it to me. It stayed on my flash drive forever because that's all I needed, 1 hour of French. And this thing was peaceful because it was slow. I did not have to look at the subtitles. I could just understand bits and pieces here and there. It was tiny content, like 10 minutes of it. It's made for kids, so you can guess that he's lost his toy or he's crying, so something's wrong, you know? You could guess, so that was helpful, and I watched a lot of that because that's all I could follow. This is around the time when I had a smartphone and I had access to the internet, so I would read news at BBC when something important happened in the world, and then I would read the same thing over at TV5 Monde or Le Monde, stuff like that. The same news that I consumed in English, I would consume it again in French. So this kind of gave me already the context behind the story, and I would just slowly pick up French words and expressions and phrases and stuff like that. If I just jumped straight into a French article, I didn't understand any of it. Graduating from TV shows for kids, which was step one for me, into trying to consume stuff that was actually written for adults, like TV shows, blogs online, news websites where you can read the news, stuff like that. So that was step two, consuming stuff meant for adults. And this is when I got introduced to the whole world of music. When it came to music, I loved hip-hop back in the day, and I wanted to find out who was the French hip-hop guy. And these guys called Section d'Assaut, I loved them back in the day. There was also La Fouine. There was another Israeli-French singer called Tal, and she sang much slower, so I enjoyed her stuff because it was not rap. And from reading the news online, listening to music online, I slowly started attempting to watch movies online. So I would watch one movie with subtitles, like the whole thing, so that I understand exactly what's happening, because the French audio was just not helpful. I was not getting anywhere with it. Just watch it with the subtitles, understand the story, and then come back and watch it without the subtitles. And I did this with exactly one movie. So this is where I have a strong message on my method, that it's not the quantity of the content that you consume, but the amount of stuff you get from each piece of content. So I just watched this one movie. I had one movie on my computer, one French movie, Les Intouchables, and I watched it over and over and over and over again. Après tout, pourquoi pas? Tu prends tes clics et tes claques et tu fous le point ici. So when I'm free, I would just fire up my computer and watch bits of Les Intouchables, like 10 minutes of it, 15 minutes of it. Sometimes I would go to the middle of the movie, just hit play, not watch it, just keep eating, not watch it, and just listen and see if I can follow what's happening. Because I know the story already, right? I know the premise, what's happening, who's where, why are they fighting, why is the volume so high, what are they fighting about, is there a car before, is there a car chase after, just stuff like that. Just guess by hitting play from the middle of the... So this kind of trained my ear, because the French language is notoriously difficult when it comes to the listening, because they have these lettres muettes, these mute letters that they don't pronounce, and they contract way more in French than they do in English. That was the kind of end of step 2 for me. Step 3 would be when I would stop doing only consumption and start doing production. I mean, when you start learning a language in the first way, you don't know anything, so you want to get more information because you can't invent it. How many Dutch words do you know before you start learning Dutch? Well, 0. And by the time you get to the end of this step 2, when you've heard enough music, when you watch enough TV shows, watched a couple of movies, watched stuff for kids that you already understand, you've read a good bit, so you already know the basic verbs, the basic words in the language. At that point is when you need to force yourself to switch to step 3, where you produce. Production orale et production écrite. You need to learn to speak and you need to learn to write. 6 years into having some kind of a French relevance in my life, when I picked up a pen and a piece of paper and I had to write something, I realized how bad I was at writing French. And so I started practicing those. I made a couple of friends online and I started sending them postcards. I always had a lot of international friends from post-crossing. This is something that I used to do. It's just a habit I built over time. So I had French friends to start with. I mean, if you don't have French friends, then you need to make them. Yeah, if you're living in India, it's still possible to make French friends. And I made a video about this. It's over here. I'm always confused if it's here or if it's here. It's over here. Check this video out where I'm talking about the richness of making friends online. This was a concept that my grandfather introduced me to. He spoke about his pen pals back in the day, the days of war, when he already had pen pals back in the day. And if you don't have that, make friends online. It helps. I forced myself to come into this area of creation, this area of writing to people, this area of speaking to the mirror. And this is around the time when I was introduced to the Feynman's technique, which completely changed my learning. Richard Feynman, a popular philosopher, no, psychologist, no, physicist. All the PHY words are just like a soup in my head. Richard Feynman, a popular physicist, American physicist, came up with this idea called the Feynman's technique to learn anything. And his idea is, when you're learning something, and I'm vulgarizing, of course, I'm paraphrasing over here. His idea is, when you want to learn something, imagine that you have a class of students, 15 students waiting for you, who will scrutinize you and ask you questions about this subject. So I'm learning about gravity. What is it? Which is the equation? So that you can transmit as much to the students. When you have this kind of pressure, you will consume more and you realize what bits of it you don't really understand. I really needed to do well in my exams and I did not want to spend a lot of time on that. So I used Feynman's technique for my engineering days as well. I did not ever aspire to be rank 1 in school. That was not my game, right? But I used it a lot for my French as well. So when I would do any kind of French consumption, when I watch a movie or a TV show and stuff like this, and I would tell myself that I'm the reported speech guy. There is a group of people who can't read and they need to know about the news because they can't read, and I have access to this app that nobody else has that I can read, and I need to tell them, and they only speak French. This step 3 really is important, because if you don't go to this step 3, you'll be that weird guy who has a very huge right bicep like this big and his left hand is like olive oil. And when you come to France and you say that you speak French and you can understand everything that people say, you understand everything that you read in French, but you can't speak it. This step 3 is where the learning curve goes from really flat to a steep thing over there up top, because you focus on creation. Language is about making yourself understood and understanding people. If you only have one bit of it, you're dumb. I mean, dumb as in the not you know what I mean. You can't speak that dumb. So I would start talking to my friends online. I added a couple of them on WhatsApp, and I really needed to learn to write on in French. I had the T9 on, of course, but I would start writing to my friends online and tell them about my day, tell them about my week, tell them the kind of new stuff that I'm consuming. It's amazing to have friends online and to go and meet them 3 years down the line. I would tell them what I'm watching right now, and I would tell them what I thought about these movies and ask them what they're consuming, what's popular in France at the moment, which songs, which movies, which TV shows. And this is why I'm also interested in politics. Of course, politics also affects my life because I now live in France. And so far, if you see, I've picked up concepts in the French grammar and things about the French grammar that I looked up online and learned, because I needed to provide some kind of structure to the things that I don't understand in French. So I do know the French grammar at this point. By the time I'm at step 3, I already can express myself in French. I understand almost everything. One would probably gauge this is B1, end of B1, early B2. If you're learning languages and you're not familiar with the A1, A2, B1, B2, the CEFR framework, then you need to look it up, because I've done an excellent job breaking down a language to the levels from beginner to expert. What does B1 mean and what does B2 mean? What can you do in B2 that you couldn't do in B1? These kind of things is really important for you to learn off. Yeah, it's a little list. It won't take you a hot second. And step 4 is where it grows even steeper than step 3. Setting yourself an ambitious goal. This is around the time when I set myself my pronunciation goal, and this came from this TV show that I watched, Bref. Everyone knows it. Every French guy has definitely watched Bref. And the way he speaks is...
Il y a des gens, quand tu leur racontes un truc marrant, au lieu de rigoler, ils disent...
Ouais, c'est marrant.
Et quand tu leur racontes un truc pas marrant, ils disent...
Ouais, c'est marrant.
Il y a des filles qui te parlent pendant des heures de trucs qui t'intéressent pas.
Anna, il te faudra un shampoing aux extraits naturels de Quetch.
J'ai pas de cheveux.
C'est bien une réponse de mec, ça.
Even when you slow it down, it's just so difficult to follow. And my goal was to understand what he's saying and not struggle. That was my goal. The problem with my entire approach, and one of these cons of having your own Frankenstein approach, is because you will make mistakes. And one of the mistakes that I made was not focusing on the fact that I want to improve my pronunciation. I spoke French with a very heavy Indian accent, and I wanted to have a heavy French accent. Roughly 7-8 years into my journey, I was already in France at this point. And this is when I set this goal, and it was a little too late because I almost had to go and relearn a lot of it. It didn't feel great because I was second guessing everything that I said. Every time I spoke, I was like, I had to second guess and rethink how a French person would say it and then have it flow. So relearning the pronunciation was really a lot of time that I wasted because I'm learning the same thing again. I already know it, but then it has to now flow with the French accent, which took a lot of time. I'm a messy guy. I'm not that structured in my approach. I like to try and fail and try again. Instead of strategizing and writing down hypothesis and doing research, I'm not that guy. This is me. You can see it in my videos and you can see it in my French learning journey. I just do, fail, tweak, do again, So if you're starting this from scratch and you don't want to waste your time, then I would suggest that you set yourself a pronunciation goal before. If you don't care about changing your pronunciation, so be it. So there's something that you could learn from my entire approach is to set your goal first before doing any of these 8 years time spending that I did, and then using that goal to inspire your exercises. If your exercises are not inspired by a goal, then you'll have to rework it and it'll be like 2 times the work later on. I've reached this goal now. I can understand breath easy peasy without need for captions. I can understand what's happening. This guy came to Paris for a stand-up comic thing and I attended his stand-up comic thing. My friends paid for me. Thank you, Florian and Sammy, for that. It was a very nice birthday gift. I attended this thing. I loved it and I understood all the jokes, what he was talking about. So I've achieved that goal. This method of starting with something that you can digest, sticking with one piece in step 1, graduating to step 2, starting consuming stuff for adults, moving to step 3, instead of consuming too much, moving the 100% consumption, 0% creation to where you consume a fourth and you produce or create a fourth. You talk to the mirror, Feynman's mirror technique maybe. You talk to the mirror, that's step 3, and then moving on to step 4, where you actually kind of wrap up in beauty what it is that you wanted to achieve with this language and arrive. Step 4 is arriving. That's the name I'm going to give step 4. Arriving. Let's jump into the pros and cons. The pros of this approach, of course, it's free. You don't have to pay for it. Secondly, you really get authentic language into you. You get the references when people make jokes. You understand all these kind of cultural implications, all this stuff. So that's the second benefit. Third benefit is that you kind of customize this to you, to your style of learning and consumption. I don't like to read. And I know that's a big no-no in the academic world, but I was able to learn this language without reading as much. Reading that little news article, the free part, right? The one where they didn't have to make you pay. When they say pay this much to read the rest of the article, that much was enough. So this was customized to my style of learning. I don't like to read as much. I don't like to sit down with a book as much. I like to go out and do stuff. This is my style of learning. If something doesn't work for you, throw it out. You're in the driver's seat. You're the creative guy. On the con side, this takes a hot second. Like any good thing, it doesn't come easy. It takes time. And I think you need to make peace with the fact that it's going to take time for you to learn this well. Learning a skill well is not just about the skill, it's also about your flavor in the skill. If you notice how your parents speak versus how you speak a certain language, you bring your own choice of phrases that you've heard others say. You've chosen to keep these phrases and let go of everything else. You have your way of speaking, your own preferential stalling words and so on. And the same thing with French. It's a creative project. This project is a part of your identity, a part of your life, where you choose the way you speak, the pronunciation, your handwriting. This thing comes out of you. The references, the stalling words, the expressions. It's not something that you can build overnight for an exam. For the exam part, you can kind of learn how to introduce yourself in an interview, but that's not really speaking a language. So that's the cons. It's the cons of any ambitious project. It's gonna take time. And I've had this rebellion on time investment thing because back in school, I remember my teachers used to measure my success to the amount of time I spent with my book. Let me not go into that whole rebellion phase of discussing with my teachers and coming out wrong. But what I can do is point you to this video where I talk about how you can spend a lot of time and make it fun for yourself. Check it out if you're interested in a long-term project. On the channel, I talk about my language learning projects. Currently, I'm working on Dutch and Urdu. I make the occasional vlog and talk about stuff around my life. Subscribe to this channel. If you like this video, there will be more stuff like this. I'll see you in the next one and keep learning.